What's up, fellow hobbyists? You have OA Gamer and Django Paints here from Far East Wargamers, bringing you another product review. Today we're going to take a look at some of the new tanks coming out from ForgeWorld. There's been a recent release as well as one upcoming release, and we got a lot to say about it.
Yeah, they look really nice. It's nice to see the Horus Heresy getting some love, and let's take this opportunity to discuss it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we'll start with the first the thing that's been released the most recent, and that's available, well, was available, I should say, the Sabre Strike Tank, and where, well, first off, I think it looks like a great vehicle in terms of the aesthetics. It's about time that Horus Heresy got, well, the Marines got something new in their lineup.
Yeah, it was a big surprise, actually. So this one came out of nowhere. Just all of a sudden it appeared on the ForgeWorld website, and it was available for order, and then it's already out of stock, which is just insane. But looking at the vehicle itself, I love it. I love the look of this thing. It obviously borrows a lot of its aesthetic from the Sicaran. It's smaller. It's definitely smaller, but you can tell from the size of the hull and just the general shape that it looks almost like a baby Venator, if you want to put it that way. But definitely the size, I think, is going to put some people off, because you can find some other videos and pictures and whatnot online from people that have already gotten their hands on this thing, and it's definitely smaller than a Rhino, which is good and bad. I mean, from a rules perspective, if you can hide one of your tank hunters in the same space that you could hide a Rhino, then that's a good thing, right?
I agree. Well, when I first saw it, I thought that my first immediate reaction was, this is a new type of Sicaran. The shape of the chassis, the way it looks, it's very Sicaran-esque. And then I started looking around, and we were talking about the size comparisons, especially in that one image. I don't think it's available anymore, or maybe I think it is here. The image here, yeah, this one here on the left-hand side, where you're comparing it to a Marine, one of the Dark Angels that they've released as well. You really got a sense of the scale, or the lack thereof, of this unit. But for all intents and purposes, I think we have to see how it plays and really the rule set it's got there. So it's not necessarily what we think it is at the initial stage. So I like tanks as well. I like the Predators myself. I'm a big fan of the Predators in 30k, and I don't think this is a replacement for it. They sit in a very similar bracket. If we look at what we're talking about for the rules wise, they're at the 65 point range, which is similar to Predator range.
Yep, very close.
Group sizes as well. This is 1 to 2. I think Predators are 1 to 3 in their squadrons there. Yep. But I think, the one thing I was saying, I've seen online and seen other people talk about, I've debated it as well, is that what role it plays and where we'll see it playing. I don't think it plays the same role as we would use a Predator. Well,
this is really interesting to me, because there's a few things that jumped out at me when I looked at the rules of this thing that I haven't really seen anybody else talking about, and it kind of surprises me. The first thing that struck me immediately is that this is a fast attack choice. So it's not sitting in the same slots as your Predator squadrons. It's more likely competing with the Javelin or some of your other tank hunting fast attacks. So for certain rights of war, for certain legions, where you perhaps are limited on the number of heavy support choices that you can take, you're obviously not going to be able to fill those with as many anti-tank units or anti-infantry units as you would like, and you would put this thing in a fast attack. So that was one thing that jumped out immediately to me. The second thing that jumped out immediately was the points cost. So if you look at the points for this, even if you change some of the weapons, it's not a very pricey unit. You're not going to get over 100 points on this thing. It's pretty reasonable, actually, and it's default weapons. There's actually nothing wrong with them, in my opinion. But we can talk a little bit more about those later on.
Yeah. So I think as well, when I was looking at the loadouts for the different weapons, and so for the main guns, basically, it's options, and the 4 options, the 3 main options, I think. There's the snub autocannon, there's the Neutron Blaster, and their tank version of a Volkite. I was a bit confused as what would be the best one for the certain scenarios, but again, I think it really depends on how you want to use it. And we were talking prior to this about where it would play in certain rights of war, and I myself am an Empress Children's player, and I never realized that with my right of war, the Hidden Blade facility, this is a very valid fast attack option for coming in on turn 2 or 3 in an outflank maneuver,
Mm-hmm.
and getting into the side of heavy support vehicles and heavy tanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was alluding to when we talked about this as a fast attack choice. I'm an Iron Hands player, and I can take head of the Gorgon, and I can, have outflanking tanks. This fulfills that type of role if I wanted it to. And yourself as an Emperor's Children player, absolutely. Maroscar, Hidden Blade. Now all of a sudden your fast attack sabers can also be doing that type of outflank, surprise somebody, hit him in the butt, hit him in the side type of role. So yeah, that immediately struck me as something that would be useful for certain rights of war, for certain legions. You're going to get more mileage out of this particular tank than you would out of others. So
it does have its trade-offs as well. So we are getting a fast vehicle, but what we're trading out there versus what a standard Predator would be is, well, the armor on the front itself. It's 1 point less,
Yep.
12 to 13.
Yep.
And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, all the main weapons, are slightly weaker versions of their heavy-duty counterparts in terms of this. So maybe some of the shorter ranges, less AP and slightly less strength. But, well, let's have a look at them now. If we look at the autocannon and compare that to the Predator's cannon, the range is slightly less at 24 inches, and so is the strength. And also the number of shots. It's a heavy 2, right?
Yeah.
Instead of heavy 4.
So you're better in some ways and you're worse in others. So the Saber Anvilus snub autocannon is half the range of a standard Predator cannon. It's half the shots, 2 versus 4. But you do get some pretty important buffs, I think, that make this kind of a winner in my eyes out of the main weapons. So you go to Strength 8 versus Strength 7, so now you're the same thing as a crack missile. You're twin-linked, which the Predator autocannon is not. So you're re-rolling those misses to hit. And then finally you have Sunder, which is giving you the re-rolls on your armor penetration. So I'm sure the Math Hammer guys have probably already worked all of this out, but just at first glance to me, I think this is a better anti-armor weapon versus a Predator when we're talking about light to medium armor. That's my opinion. Again, yeah, the range for a lot of people is going to be an issue, but if you get back to that how you use this, where it infiltrates, outflanks, hits somebody in the side, that range is a non-issue, right? And this in some ways becomes your suicide tank, right?
Well, I agree in terms of you take this and this 65-point tank at base model coming in on turn 2 and takes out a Sikaran by getting in on its side or even on its rear, because let's face it, when you're playing games and you're coming in on our flanks, the Sikarans are never facing straight down table. They tend to be on the wings of some sort, and since they're a fast moving vehicle as well, they tend to be angled in. So you're coming in on the side, potentially behind it, and you've got a rear shot with a strength 2 rear shot, strength 8 re-rolls, and Sunder. It seems like a very easy way to get a few hull points down on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not that you would use this thing to go hunt Armor 14 Spartans and Land Raiders, but that Strength 8 does at least give you a fighting chance. Maybe you do come in, you get all you're looking for is that one last 6 to take off that final hull point. You have that option here where you don't have that with the Predators. So I think that's something to be considered. And to me, actually, if we look at the next main weapon, the Neutron Blaster, which supposedly would be the anti-tank weapon, I don't get it, to be honest with you. It's a baby version of a Venator. It has much less range. It has lower strength, worse AP, although it's still AP2. But you're missing one important thing, which is the extra shot and its ordnance on the Venator. Whereas here, we don't have that. And you're basically getting one chance to hit with that Strength 9. I would rather take my chances with the 2 Strength 8 shots from the snub autocannon myself.
I can't disagree with you in terms of that. I think that taking away some of the key special features of what could have been a great weapon in terms of an anti-tank weapon, we're getting limited in range, so that's really, to me, one of the biggest downsides. Taking down the features of the weapon to make it even weaker, so you have to get really close and you still can't do the damage you need to do, as opposed to sitting far away and doing the same amount of damage with an alternative tank there, so the laser destroyers and such. It's, I think it was a miss. I think it was a miss there. Now, I think they'll probably look at rebalancing this later when it's more widely available. But the one thing about it is I do love the look of the tank, but we just can't get any. that's the other side of this. So if we go to the ForgeWorld website, I think let's have a look here. The ForgeWorld website themselves, if I scroll up, where this one here is 135 pounds, but it's not available.
Yeah, and it's been sold out for a while.
Hold on.
It's been sold out for almost just a couple days after it was released. And yeah, that makes it makes it a bit of a challenge to get your hands on one of these things. But I mean, if I was buying it myself, and we didn't even talk about the other main weapon, which is the Volkite Saker, or Sacker, or however you want to say it. I'm American, so I'm going to butcher it. That weapon, again, to me also kind of doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because it's obviously, as Volkite, it's anti-infantry, it's 6 shots, has all the standard rules of Volkite, but it has half the range of a standard culverin, which is strange, right?
Yeah.
And again, anything that you want to be using as anti-infantry, this probably isn't it.
I'd like to see it as an option for anti-infantry, I won't lie, because the fact is, if you're putting this with the Volkite Saker, and you've also got the normal Volkite on the pintle, the culverin on the pintle there, you're pumping out 10 Volkite shots, which does have the potential of doing a lot of damage on just a normal squad. But do you really want to be sending out one of these vehicles just after the normal infantry squads, or even a weaker specialist unit?
No, not at all. And I mean, you also bump the points on it now up to 95 by putting on the 2 Volkite weapons. A Rhino with a pintle-mounted heavy bolter and a couple guys with Volkite chargers shooting out of the top hatch. You're not doing much different, right? So again, to me, this is a miss on the main weapon for a platform that really doesn't need to be anti-infantry. I don't see it like that. I see this thing as a little tank hunter with that snub autocannon. I really do. And taking advantage of those special rights of war, those special Legion rules to get it where it needs to go. The other weapon that we talked about is the Saber Missile, which is so much different than a standard hunter-killer.
It's a baby version of it.
It's a big baby version of it. It doesn't have the unlimited range. It's only strength 6 versus strength 8. Now, you do get the bonus of the special rule of missile lock, which the Saber has, which allows you to reroll the misses if you have these missiles. I view these things as a bonus. So I come in on the flank, or I get a lucky rear shot. I'm counting on the autocannon to do the real work, but if I can pump a few strength 6 shots in there as well, okay, fine.
It's true, because you can, in the gameplay, you can shoot one after the other. You don't have to shoot all of them at the same time. You can see how it goes with your main weapon, and this is the coup de grace, the potential coup de grace if you needed to, because if you're not moving the full range, you could fire off all of your salvos. I think you can have up to 4 on this, right?
Yeah, you can take 4. And one thing also to consider is it has that rending rule. So theoretically, if all of your rolls were perfect, you could get strength 15 armor penetration out of these things. But again, if you're betting on that, that's probably not a good, wise gameplay.
No, but you got to bear in mind, against the more standardized tanks, which don't have the uniform armor all around, here you're supposed to be coming in, you're supposed to be more maneuverable. You're supposed to be able to get the flank shots off, the side shots, potentially a rear shot if you have outflanked and managed to get rear shots there. So you are targeting the slightly weaker armors of more generic tanks. I still think going up against Sicarans, this thing is going to struggle.
Head on for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you do have a fighting chance again. Strength 8, strength 6 with rending on the front armor 13, but I would never use this thing like that. Never going heads up with anything. Yeah. Again, playing Iron Hands, I'm going to throw a couple of these onto my fast attack slot, and I'm going to use that outflank rule from Head of the Gorgon. Pop on, and I'm sure your Emperor's Children would probably have a similar usage. So for me, I think that really the autocannon is the only worthwhile weapon. I don't like the other ones at all. For pintle weapon, why you would put a heavy flamer on this thing is beyond me, unless you wanted to be fluffy. I play Death Guard, so yeah, it would be great to have some chem munitions and a heavy flamer, but I would never use it. Multi-Melta is interesting because that gives you another very high-strength deadly weapon, but it comes at 25 points. So now all of a sudden, if you've put that on there and you've bought 4 of the Saber missiles, you're now over 100 points with this, 110.
It's no longer the cheap disposable unit that it was.
No, it's now you have to start thinking about it a little bit more, especially if you run this in a squadron of 2, then that's 220 plus points that you have wrapped up in that. Do I think they can get their points back? Yeah, I think they could.
Yeah.
But I think would stick with just the heavy bolter and the missiles and the autocannon. Maybe the multi-melta, good choices. But other than that, I probably wouldn't pour any other points into this at all.
So I think you're right. In terms of, we have been given the flexibility to fit this how you want to, but there is only really one way to fit this vehicle at this point in time with the current rule sets. The autocannon is the way to go, regardless of what you're trying to do there. And I think that I'm waiting to see more battle reports coming from everybody else online about how these guys are playing in actual games and how people are utilizing them, whether they're running head on at people, which I think, like I agree with you, is a bit of a mistake. These aren't things to run head on. They aren't that strong. They're pretty squishy. They're gonna need to be protected by something. They're weaker than a Predator itself, and those pop relatively fast in 30k games, in Horus Heresy games there. So losing the armor, it's not much more than an actual Rhino. And
Yeah, I mean, and we said pintle earlier, but when we were talking about replacing the heavy bolter with something like a multi-melta, that's actually the whole mounted weapon. For the pintle mounted weapon, you could take a combi melta as well. So you're really talking, actually, multi-melta, combi melta, ambulances snub autocannon, 4 Saber missiles. I think you're going to kill a lot of stuff out there on the flank, in the rear. But again, you're bumping the points up on these pretty high. And I don't know. One last thing that we didn't really talk about was the Javelin, because that's another fast attack slot vehicle that does its job very well and is not points intensive. So with the Javelin, you're getting the twin-link missile launchers, you're getting the 2 hunter-killer missiles that are full strength, you're getting the pintle-mounted multi-melta on that thing, and then you're getting things like strafing run where your ballistics go 5 and you're hitting on 2s, you're deep striking in, putting it wherever you want. Yeah, I think if I'm putting the 2 of these up against each other, I'll go with the Javelin every single time. But I don't think the Saber is as useless as a lot of people say it is, especially for those certain rights of war. I can't say that enough.
Yeah, so I think a nice thing to see, it's very nice to see. I think it's well executed in terms of the model itself. If we go back to the aesthetics of the model, I think it's very well executed. I think that it's going to be beautiful to see on boards to play. And don't forget, Horus Heresy, we're competitive in a sense, but we're also here for the aesthetics and the fluff. I can't say this enough, I think all the stuff that's coming out of ForgeWorld in the past and now into the future is a lot nicer than the stuff coming out of the main company.
Oh, I love it. I mean, if you ask me to buy this model, yes, I'll take 12 because I love the way it looks.
Well, let's talk about that. You want to take 12. The pricing of these things, these aren't cheap. I don't know how ForgeWorld is going about their pricing, but you get 2 plastic Preds for the same price, for less than one of these on their own.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we're talking about ForgeWorld, rest of world pricing, for those of us not located in the UK, there's no logical reason, honestly, why it costs what it does. I'm sorry, I can't agree with that. You're absolutely right. You can get multiple plastic Predators for the cost of one of these. Half of these weapons that come with this particular armory deal, you're never going to use. You're not going to use the heavy flamer, more than likely. You're probably never going to use the Volkite weapon or the Volkite, pintle mount as well. You're not going to use these things, and so I can't justify that price level. I really can't. So if I'm going to buy this thing, I'm going to buy it just with the Ambulance autocannon.
So I agree, and the only good thing I see about when they released this and the speed it was sold is that it just has to prove to ForgeWorld that there is still a market and you've got to start focusing on it again. If we're that hungry, if the community is that hungry to buy a tank which we don't even know how to use yet, straight on the pre-order straight away and get sold out, that really does mean you're under catering to this market.
Oh, it's resin crack. Let's be honest. It's resin crack. Those of us into ForgeWorld, into 30K, we're addicts. We're in it for the long haul. And that's why I said I want 12 of this thing. I don't care how good it is. I love the way it looks, and I can find a place for it in pretty much every Legion that I own in any kind of game. One last point that I'd also like to make as well is for those of us that are trying to add things like hunter-killer missiles to our Javelin speeders, boom, here's your answer. You've got 2 matching pairs of them right now that if you decide not to use on your Saber, or if you're smart and you magnetize your Saber and your Javelin, you've now got your hunter-killer missiles that you can use on those land speeders as well, or even your regular land speeders, not just the Javelin.
Yeah.
But yeah, price point aside, I love the way it looks. I do think it's useful. My own personal recommendation would be, yes, I'll take this. Definitely for my Iron Hands, who because of that Head of the Gorgon Rite of War are going to get a lot of mileage out of this. Absolutely. And I'll probably take it with some other Legions as well, just because, hey, I love the model.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I do love the model, and I think they'll be on my shopping list for Christmas and coming into the new year in 2020. Now, speaking of 2020 and the coming times, this has been released already, but they've just teased us with another tank. So before we round off this little video here, I'd like to take a look at, well, this bombard that they're throwing out here.
Yeah, Christmas literally and figuratively comes early this year because we have gotten a whole slew of releases over the last month, and this is just the latest one. Yet another tank for the Space Marine Armory. Wow. Love it. I love the look. We don't know the rules yet, so we can't really talk too much about that. We can make some educated guesses. But as far as the aesthetic, again, it's got that mini Sicaran look to it. It's actually been reversed. So
yeah, it's an upside down, well, back to front Sicaran,
yep,
which is an interesting take on how to do it. And well, we were looking at the actual main gun there that they've displayed here and comparing it to the Leviathan version, its Leviathan counterpart. It's similar, but is distinctively different from what it is.
Yeah.
So when we're trying to figure out size, I think we both come to an agreement that this isn't Sicaran size. This is going to be Saber tank size. This is going to be another mini tank coming out here.
I think so too. Everything about the side panels, the hatch with the single driver, all of that screams to me it's pretty much the same size as the Saber. But obviously you've got the sponsored weapons on this that the Saber doesn't have. That grab weapon at the top is definitely bigger than a Leviathan's. The shape is relatively similar, but it's not the same. It does have some differences. What I also noticed on this vehicle is it's got some sort of either grenade launchers or missile launchers up there on the sides.
Yeah.
Are those for smoke? We don't know. Are those for some other sort of weapon? Interesting. Maybe upping the
They do look like smoke
damage.
launchers to me. So
Yep.
we'll see when the rules come out. So it's a nice teaser to get before Christmas. I think everything here I think it's announced to come out in the next book, whenever that may be. We can all hope and pray for that
I know
to be
your
soon.
Dark Angel's heart is crying right now.
Yes, I'm looking to start my own Dark Angels, and barring the standard tactical squads, I really don't want to build anything specific yet until the rule set comes out. So the sooner that comes out, the happier I'll be. And I think a lot of people out there waiting for the First Legion to get their rules, their proper rules, are eager for it as well.
Well, the good news is that they keep teasing you with these new units painted up in First Legion colors. So, yeah, here's to hoping they get some good, cool rules and different things in Book 9 as well. The other thing that struck me about this thing is, okay, it looks like a Plague Burst Crawler.
Yes.
It looks like, the Death Guard got a hold of a few of these things before they turned traitor, and then here you go. Now you have Plague Burst Crawlers. Very similar aesthetic with the shape, with the kind of front-to-back design.
Yeah.
Sponsored weapons, main gun on it. So who knows? Maybe the fluff is going to tell us of some sort of connection between the two of these, or maybe not. But it would make sense, at least from a first glance perspective, that they do share so much in common.
I hope they do fluff out, that's one part of it, I hope they do fluff out the history of it and give it some background and some explanations of all this. It's part of what we love about being and playing Horus Heresy. It's the story and the background. So when they release new tanks, or anything new, I want the background for it.
Yep.
Like,
Absolutely.
how come we've just seen it?
Well, fingers crossed. And once we get access to the rules on this, whoever knows when that's going to be. But then we can do a follow-up report on it and maybe give you our thoughts on how it is from a rules perspective. But as of right now, all we have to go on is these pictures, and they look pretty intriguing. I like it. I'll take 12. So between the Saber and this, I'm going to be very broke in 2020.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, guys, OA Gamer, thanks very much for chatting with me. This is our first of many videos we're going to do on some reviews, and stay tuned, guys. We will see you in the coming days and weeks.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me. Have a great one.